Standing in my bedroom doorway at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, I watched my sister Natasha twirl in front of my full-length mirror wearing my wedding dress. The ivory silk caught the lamplight as she posed, running her hands down the beaded bodice, admiring herself like she was the bride. The problem? I'd been married for 8 months, and she worked for my husband. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. This wasn't the first time I'd caught her in my dress. It wasn't even the second. But it was the first time I understood what she was really doing, and why the timing mattered more than I'd ever imagined. My name is Delia, and if you're watching this from wherever you are in the world, stay with me. Because what started as a sister's obsession with a wedding dress became the unraveling of a conspiracy that had been building for years. And the moment I realized my husband Marcus wasn't just her boss, he was her target. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and my own instincts shifted forever. The house was supposed to be empty. Marcus was in Chicago on business and wouldn't be back until Thursday. I'd driven up from Phoenix after my conference ended early, looking forward to a quiet evening alone. I parked in the garage, used the side entrance, kicked off my heels in the mudroom. The house felt different somehow, but I couldn't place why. The air was thicker, charged with something I couldn't name. I'd made it halfway up the stairs when I heard the music. Soft, instrumental, coming from our bedroom. Wedding music. The same song that had played when I walked down the aisle at Desert Botanical Garden last spring. My chest tightened. Marcus always played jazz when he was home. Never classical, never anything romantic unless we were together. The bedroom door was cracked open, spilling warm light into the hallway. I approached slowly, my stockings silent against the hardwood. Through the gap I could see movement, fabric, someone turning in front of the mirror. My first thought was an intruder. My second thought was impossible. My third thought was the truth I'd been avoiding for months. Natasha had let herself in again. She stood with her back to the door, arms raised above her head, examining how the dress fell across her shoulders. The zipper was pulled tight, the train spread carefully behind her. She'd even put on my veil, the one that had belonged to our grandmother, the one she'd begged me not to wear because it was too traditional for someone trying so hard to be elegant. I pushed the door open wider. The hinges creaked. She spun around, eyes wide, but not embarrassed, not ashamed, almost expectant, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Delia." She smiled, the same bright smile she'd given everyone at my wedding reception while she whispered poison in their ears about how I'd gotten lucky, how Marcus was too good for me, how she'd seen him first at the law firm where she worked as his paralegal. "You're home early. Take it off." My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. "Take off my dress, Natasha." She turned back to the mirror, smoothing the silk over her hips. "It fits me better than it ever fit you, don't you think? I mean, look at how it falls. It's like it was made for my body." The casual cruelty of it hit me like cold water. Not just the words, but the familiarity in her voice, like we'd had this conversation before, like she'd been practicing it. "This is the 4th time I've found you here." I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. "The 4th time in 8 months. What are you doing, Natasha? What is this really about?" She met my eyes in the mirror's reflection. "You know, I was at the office late tonight. Marcus and I were going over the Henderson case. He mentioned you were out of town." She paused, adjusting the neckline. He seemed distant, distracted, like something was bothering him. My stomach dropped. "You drove here straight from his office?" "He gave me a key months ago, for emergencies." She turned to face me directly now, the train of the dress rustling against the carpet. "He's been so stressed lately, Delia. About work, about finances, about whether he made the right choice getting married so young. 28 is pretty young for a partner at a law firm to settle down, don't you think?" The room felt smaller, suddenly, airless. Marcus never said anything about being stressed about our marriage. "Well, he wouldn't tell you, would he? You're his wife. But I'm his right hand at work. I see him every day. I know his moods, his patterns. I know when something's eating at him." She walked closer, the dress making soft, swooshing sounds with each step. I know him in ways you never will. I stared at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd missed before. This wasn't random. The timing, the dress, the key, the late nights at the office. She hadn't just wandered into my closet on impulse. She'd planned this. All of it. How long have you been doing this? I asked quietly. Doing what? Coming here when I'm gone, wearing my dress, playing house in my bedroom. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of glass. You're being paranoid. I was just curious. I never got to try it on properly at your fitting. You were so possessive of it, remember? Wouldn't let anyone touch it. But that wasn't true. I'd invited her to every fitting, begged her to be involved, and wanted her approval. She'd been the one who stood in the corner of the bridal salon with her arms crossed, making faces at every dress I tried on, telling me nothing looked right, that I was rushing into marriage with a man who was clearly out of my league. Take off the dress, I repeated, but my voice had changed. Lower now, more dangerous. Take it off and get out of my house. Your house? She tilted her head, and for a moment she looked exactly like she had when we were children, and she was about to break something of mine just to watch me cry. Funny, I thought it was Marcus's house, his name on the deed, his money that bought it. What exactly do you contribute to this marriage, Delia? Besides looking pretty at firm events? The words were designed to wound, and they did, but underneath the hurt something else was building, clarity. Because she'd just revealed something she shouldn't have known. How do you know whose name is on the deed? The question hung in the air between us. For the first time since I'd walked in, Natasha looked uncertain. Marcus mentioned it, during one of our conversations. What conversations? About real estate? About our marriage? What exactly do you and my husband talk about that involves the ownership of my home? She turned back to the mirror, but I could see her face in the reflection, the calculation behind her eyes. We work together, Delia. We talk about everything. That's what happens when you spend 60 hours a week with someone. You become close. Close. The words settled in my chest like a stone. I walked to my dresser, opened the top drawer, and pulled out my phone. Started recording. What are you doing? She asked, spinning around. I want you to repeat what you just said, about spending 60 hours a week with my husband, about becoming close, about how he's stressed about our marriage but confides in you instead of me. Stop recording me. I want you to explain why you have a key to my house. Why do you know about our deeds? Why are you in my bedroom, in my wedding dress, at midnight on a Tuesday, playing music from my wedding? I said stop. But I didn't stop. Because for the first time in 8 months of marriage, 6 years of sisterhood since our parents remarried and blended our families, I was seeing Natasha clearly. Not as the successful paralegal who'd helped me meet Marcus at a firm party. Not as the sister who'd stood beside me at the altar, holding my bouquet, smiling for the cameras, but as someone who'd been playing a longer game than I'd ever imagined. Tell me about the Henderson case, I said, still recording. The one you were working on tonight. With Marcus. Until what time? I don't have to answer your questions. Until what time, Natasha? Because Marcus texted me at 9 p.m. from his hotel in Chicago. Said he was exhausted, going to bed early, so either he was lying to me or you're lying to me. Which is it? The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. She reached behind her back, struggling with the zipper of the dress. I need help getting out of this. No, I lowered the phone but kept recording. You figured out how to get into it. You can figure out how to get out of it. But first, I want you to tell me exactly how many times you've been in this house when I wasn't here. Delia, you're being crazy. How many times have you worn my dress? I told you this was just... How many times have you stood in my bedroom, in my clothes, pretending to be me? Her face changed then, the mask slipping just enough for me to see what was underneath. Not embarrassment, not guilt, something colder, something that had been there all along, waiting. You want to know the truth? She stopped struggling with the zipper and faced me fully, my grandmother's veil still crowning her dark hair. Fine. I've been coming here for months. Every time you travel for work. Every time you visit friends. Every time you leave Marcus alone. And yes, I've worn this dress. I've slept in your bed. I've cooked in your kitchen, showered in your bathroom, answered your phone when it rang. The room spun slightly. You what? I've been living the life you think you have, the one you're too naive to realize you're losing. She smiled then, and it was nothing like the sister I thought I knew. Marcus doesn't even notice the difference anymore. Do you know what that says about how present you are in your own marriage? My hands were shaking now, but I kept the phone steady. You're lying. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Am I? When was the last time you and Marcus had dinner together? Just the two of you. When was the last time he initiated sex? When was the last time he told you about his day without you having to drag it out of him? Each question hit me like a physical blow because I couldn't answer them. Not honestly. He comes home tired, I whispered. He's building his career, we're building our future together. No, Delia, he's building his future. And I'm the one helping him build it. You're just the pretty decoration he married because it looked good for the partners. But the decoration gets old, it collects dust, it becomes invisible. I stared at her, this person wearing my dress, standing in my bedroom, dismantling my marriage with surgical precision, and I realized that everything I'd thought I knew about the past year had been wrong. Get out, I said quietly. I can't get the zipper down. I need help. Then call Marcus. Tell him his paralegal is stuck in his wife's wedding dress. See what he says. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Delia, don't. Don't make this bigger than it is. But it was already bigger than she knew. Because as I stood there, recording her confession, watching her squirm in my dress like a snake shedding skin, I wasn't just angry. I wasn't just hurt. I was something else entirely. I was done being invisible in my own life. And I was about to make sure everyone else could see what I'd been blind to for far too long. The next morning, I sat in my car outside Marcus's law firm at 7:45 a.m., watching employees filter through the glass doors of the 30-story building downtown. I'd barely slept, my mind churning over Natasha's words, replaying every detail of the past 8 months for signs I'd missed. The phone recording was saved in 3 different places. But I needed more than her confession. I needed proof of what was really happening between her and my husband. Natasha's silver Honda pulled into the parking garage at exactly 8:10 a.m. She was always punctual, always professional, always perfect in that way that made everyone trust her instantly. I watched her emerge from the elevator wearing a navy blazer, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, looking nothing like the woman who'd stood in my bedroom wearing my wedding dress 12 hours earlier. I gave her a 10-minute head start, then followed. The lobby of Hartwell Morrison and Associates buzzed with morning energy. Lawyers in expensive suits clutched coffee cups and briefcases, discussing cases in hushed, urgent tones. I'd been here dozens of times for firm events, holiday parties, the occasional lunch with Marcus. The receptionist, Carmen, smiled when she saw me. Mrs. Morrison, what a nice surprise. Marcus didn't mention you were coming in today. Morrison. I'd taken Marcus's name when we married, something that had thrilled his mother and annoyed my own. Now, hearing it spoken aloud, I wondered if I'd earned the right to wear it, or if I was just another piece of his carefully constructed image. He's still in Chicago, I said, signing the visitor log with steady hands. Actually, I was hoping to speak with Natasha Chen. She's been so helpful with some questions I had about the Henderson case. Carmen's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something I couldn't read. Oh, Natasha's not in yet. She called in sick this morning. Food poisoning, I think she said. My blood turned to ice water. Sick? Yes, it sounded terrible on the phone. Said she'd probably be out all day, maybe tomorrow too. Carmen leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, I think she's been working too hard lately. She and Mr. Morrison have been putting in some serious hours on that case. I managed to keep my voice level. What time did she call? Oh, maybe 20 minutes ago? Right around 8:30. 20 minutes ago, when I'd watched her walk into this building looking perfectly healthy, my phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus. Hope you slept well. Meetings all day. Love you. I stared at the message, then at Carmen's concerned face, then at the elevator bank where my sister had disappeared. She wasn't sick. She'd seen me in the parking garage and called in a fake illness rather than face me at work. But why? What was she afraid I'd discover here? Actually, Carmen, could you help me with something? I'm planning a surprise for Marcus when he gets back from Chicago. Something to do with his office. Would it be possible for me to take a quick look, just to get some measurements? Carmen hesitated. Well, I'm not supposed to let anyone up without an appointment, even family. But she glanced around the lobby, lowering her voice. Marcus did mention you might be stopping by sometime this week. Something about redecorating ideas for his office? He'd said no such thing, but I nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. I wanted to surprise him with some new furniture ideas. Just a quick peek? 5 minutes later, I was riding the elevator to the 15th floor, my heart hammering against my ribs. Marcus's office was in the corner, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His name was etched on a brass plate beside the door. Marcus J. Morrison, partner. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything looked exactly as it had the last time I'd visited. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, diplomas and awards covering one wall. But something felt different. I walked around his desk, running my fingers along the surface, looking for anything out of place. Then I saw it. A framed photo I'd never noticed before, tucked behind his computer monitor, where only someone sitting in his chair would see it clearly. It was from last year's firm Christmas party. Marcus stood in the center, wearing his black tuxedo, arms around 2 women. Me on his left, in the red dress he'd bought me for the occasion, and Natasha on his right, in a black gown that perfectly complemented his outfit. But it wasn't the photo itself that made my stomach drop. It was the way we were positioned. I stood slightly apart, Marcus's arm loose around my waist, my smile bright but somehow distant. Natasha, however, was pressed close against his side, her body angled toward him, her hand resting on his chest. And Marcus was looking down at her, not at the camera, with an expression I'd never seen him wear when he looked at me. I picked up the frame, studying it more closely. In the background, barely visible, was another figure. Carmen from the front desk, holding her phone up, clearly taking her own photo of the same moment. Which meant this wasn't the official party photographer's shot. This was candid. Real. Unguarded. I set the frame down and opened his desk drawer, looking for I didn't know what. Inside were the usual items: pens, business cards, breath mints. But underneath a stack of legal pads, I found something that made my hands go numb. A hotel key card from the Fairmont downtown, room 1247. Dated 3 weeks ago, the same night Marcus had told me he was working late on client presentations. My phone was already out, calling the Fairmont before I'd consciously decided to do it. Good morning, Fairmont Hotel, this is Jessica. How can I help you? Hi, I was hoping to get some information about a stay last month. Room 1247, I believe it was March 15th? I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't provide guest information without proper identification. Are you the guest who stayed in that room? I looked at the key card again, at my husband's name etched on the brass nameplate, at the photo of him gazing down at my sister. Yes, I am. This is Mrs. Morrison. I think I may have left something in that room and I wanted to check if housekeeping found it. One moment, please. The sound of typing. I see that room was registered to a Mr. Marcus Morrison for one night, March 15th. But the reservation shows 2 guests, and it looks like there was a special request for champagne and roses. Very romantic. Did you enjoy your stay? The world tilted. 2 guests? Yes, the reservation notes indicate it was for you and your husband. Anniversary celebration, it says here. How sweet. I hung up without another word. Anniversary celebration. March 15th. Our 6-month wedding anniversary. The night Marcus told me he had to work late. That the Henderson case was heating up. That he'd be home by midnight. The night I'd waited up until 2 a.m., worried something had happened to him. The night he'd finally come home smelling like expensive hotel soap and murmuring apologies about client demands. I sat in his chair, staring at that photo, and felt 8 months of marriage rearrange themselves in my mind. Every late night, every weekend work session, every time Natasha had been there when I called the office. Every time Marcus had seemed distant, distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. My phone rang. Marcus. Hey, beautiful, how's your morning going? The casualness in his voice, the easy affection made me want to scream. Instead, I kept my voice steady. Fine, just running some errands. How's Chicago? Productive. Looks like I might be able to wrap up early, actually. Maybe catch a flight tonight instead of Thursday. That's wonderful. I can't wait to see you. The lie tasted like copper in my mouth. Actually, Marcus, I had a question about something. Shoot. The Henderson case. The one you and Natasha have been working on so intensively. I was just curious. When did that case actually start? Silence on the other end, just long enough to be telling. Why do you ask? No particular reason. I was just proud of how hard you've been working, and I realized I didn't even know the details of what was keeping you so busy. It's complex. I started about 4 months ago, maybe 5, corporate litigation, very dry stuff, you'd be bored. 4 months ago was November, 3 months after our wedding. Right around the time Marcus had started working late more frequently. Right around the time Natasha had started texting me more often about family dinners and girls' nights, always wanting to know where I'd be and when. And Natasha's been your lead paralegal on it the whole time? Delia, is everything okay? You sound strange. I looked at his desk, at the hotel keycard, at the photo of him gazing down at my sister with an expression I'd never seen. Everything's fine. I just miss you. Miss you too. I'll text you my flight details when I book something. After he hung up, I sat in his office for another 10 minutes, thinking. Then I opened his computer. It was password protected, but I knew Marcus. He wasn't creative with passwords. He used the same one for everything, a combination of his birthday and his law school graduation year. The screen unlocked immediately. His email was open, sorted by most recent. The top message was from this morning, sent to his secretary. Cancel all my Thursday appointments. Flying back tonight. Personal matters need immediate attention. Personal matter, not business, personal. I scrolled down through his recent emails, looking for anything involving Natasha or the Henderson case. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Email after email between Marcus and Natasha going back months. Not just work communications, but personal messages sent during business hours, after hours, on weekends. Messages that started professional and gradually became something else entirely. Marcus, thank you for the coffee this morning. It meant more than you know. -N. Natasha, you looked beautiful at the partners' dinner. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. -M. I know this is complicated, but last night was perfect. I haven't felt this way about anyone in years. -M. We need to be careful, but I can't regret what's happening between us. You understand me in ways she never has. -M. The emails were dated. The earliest ones are from October, just 2 months after my wedding. The most recent from yesterday morning, sent while I was still at my conference in Phoenix. Something's different with Delia lately. She's asking more questions, paying more attention. We might need to be more discreet for a while. Nemen. Don't worry. I know how to handle my sister. She sees what she wants to see. Always has. Nejishen plan. I screenshotted everything. Every email, every date, every casual mention of last night, and when can I see you again, and she doesn't suspect anything. My hands moved automatically while my mind tried to process the scope of what I was reading. This wasn't a recent affair. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a gradual emotional connection that had crossed a line. This was a calculated, sustained betrayal that had been happening almost from the beginning of my marriage. And my sister had been the architect of it all. I thought about the wedding dress, about finding her in my bedroom over and over again. It hadn't been about the dress at all. It had been about the life that came with it. She'd been practicing, trying it on for size, seeing how it felt to be Mrs. Marcus Morrison. The office door opened behind me. I spun around, expecting security or Marcus's secretary, but it was Carmen from the front desk. Mrs. Morrison? I just wanted to check. Oh my goodness, are you all right? You look pale. I realized I was shaking. Carmen, can I ask you something? And I need you to be completely honest with me. She stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. Of course. How long have Marcus and Natasha been close? Carmen's face changed, sympathy replacing surprise. She walked over and sat in the chair across from Marcus's desk. the same chair where clients discussed their legal problems, where lives were dissected and rebuilt. "I was wondering when you'd ask that question," she said quietly. "I've been hoping you'd ask it." "So you know." "Honey, everyone knows. They think they're being discreet, but—" She shook her head. "The late-night dinners, the business trips that require only one paralegal, the way they look at each other in meetings. The hotel reservations were made through the firm account." My mouth went dry. Hotel reservations? Plural? "The Fairmont, the Westin, that boutique place in Scottsdale when they had the client meeting last month. Mrs. Morrison, I booked travel for this entire firm. I know what business trips look like and what affairs look like." The room felt like it was closing in around me. "Why didn't you tell me?" Carmen looked down at her hands. "It wasn't my place, and honestly, I kept hoping it would burn out, that Marcus would come to his senses. You seem like such a nice woman, and she—" Carmen paused, choosing her words carefully. "She's very ambitious, very determined to get what she wants." "What does that mean?" "It means she applied for a job here the day after your engagement was announced in the newspaper. She had no paralegal experience, but she interviewed brilliantly, charmed everyone, especially Marcus. And she made sure to mention, casually, that she was your sister, like it was a fun coincidence." The air left my lungs completely. "She applied here after our engagement?" "The very next day. I remember because I processed her application. She wrote in her cover letter that she was looking for a fresh start, a new challenge, and that she'd recently had some wonderful news in her family that made her want to pursue her career more seriously." I stared at Carmen, this kind woman who'd been watching my marriage implode from the front desk of my husband's law firm, and I understood that everything I'd believed for the past year and a half had been orchestrated. Natasha hadn't just met Marcus at a firm party, she'd engineered getting invited to firm parties. She hadn't just become his paralegal by coincidence, she'd targeted the position specifically to get close to him. And I'd helped her do it. I'd been so proud when she got the job, so happy that my new sister and my fiancé would be working together, so naively pleased that my family was becoming intertwined with his. "Carmen," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest, "I need you to help me with something." Carmen locked Marcus's office door and pulled out her phone. "I've been documenting things," she said quietly, scrolling through what looked like a private photo album. "Not because I wanted to spy, but because I was worried about you. And honestly, I was worried about the firm's reputation if this ever came out publicly." She handed me the phone. The first photo was time-stamped from 6 months ago, Marcus and Natasha in the firm's conference room during what appeared to be a late evening meeting. Except Marcus's hand was resting on Natasha's lower back, and she was leaning into him in a way that had nothing to do with legal documents. "I was working late that night, filing quarterly reports," Carmen explained. "I walked past the conference room to get something from the copy center, and I saw them through the glass. At first, I thought maybe I was misreading the situation, but—" She swiped to the next photo. Same conference room, different angle. This time Natasha was sitting on the edge of the conference table, while Marcus stood between her legs, his hands on her thighs, their faces inches apart. I started taking pictures after that, whenever I saw something that didn't look right. I told myself I was protecting the firm from a sexual harassment lawsuit, but really, I was protecting you. I kept thinking someone needed to have proof, if this ever exploded. The photos continued. Marcus and Natasha in the parking garage, her pressed against his car while he kissed her neck. The two of them entered the Fairmont Hotel together on a Tuesday afternoon when the calendar showed Marcus was supposed to be in client meetings. Natasha leaves his office early one morning, her hair disheveled, carrying her shoes. "This one was taken the day after your 6-month anniversary," Carmen said, stopping on a particularly damning image. Marcus and Natasha in his office, her wearing the same black dress from the Christmas party photo, him lifting her onto his desk while she pulls at his tie. I remembered that day. I'd made dinner reservations at our favorite restaurant to celebrate, but Marcus had called at the last minute saying an emergency motion needed to be filed. I'd eaten alone, then gone home and fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him. "Carmen, how long have you known about the wedding dress situation?" Her expression darkened. "What wedding dress situation?" I told her everything, finding Natasha in my bedroom repeatedly, The key Marcus had given her. The way she'd acted like she belonged in my house, in my life, in my marriage. Carmen's face grew more horrified with each detail. Jesus, Delia, she's been living a double life. But it's worse than that. Carmen sat back in her chair, thinking. Remember when you and Marcus got engaged? The engagement party your parents threw at that country club? I nodded. It had been a beautiful evening, all our friends and family celebrating our future together. Natasha gave a speech that night. I wasn't there, but Marcus talked about it for weeks afterward. He said she was so eloquent, so supportive, that she really understood what kind of partnership you two had. He was impressed by how thoughtful she was about your relationship. A chill ran down my spine. What did she say in the speech? I don't know the exact words, but Marcus mentioned she talked about how marriage was about more than love. It was about finding someone who could challenge you, support your ambitions, understand the demands of your career. Someone who could be a true partner, not just a companion. I closed my eyes, remembering that night. Natasha had indeed given a beautiful speech, one that had made everyone cry, including me. She'd talked about watching me find my perfect match, about how rare it was to see two people who were so perfectly suited for each other's lives. But now, hearing it described through Marcus's reaction, I realized she hadn't been talking about me at all. She'd been describing herself. She'd been planting seeds, making him think about what he wanted in a wife, what he valued in a partnership. And she'd done it so skillfully that everyone, including me, had interpreted it as sisterly love and support. Carmen, I need you to show me everything. Every photo, every document, every hotel reservation. I need to understand the full scope of this. For the next hour, Carmen walked me through what she called her evidence file. It was extensive and damaging and heartbreaking. Credit card statements showing expensive dinners charged to the firm account. Travel vouchers for business trips that required only Marcus and one paralegal. Calendar entries for client meetings that Carmen knew were fake because she scheduled the real client meetings. Look at this, she said, pulling up Marcus's calendar from February. See how many late evening appointments he had? Henderson case strategy sessions every Tuesday and Thursday from 7 to 11 p.m. But the Henderson case didn't exist yet. It wasn't filed until March. Then what were they actually doing during those 4-hour sessions? Carmen gave me a look that answered the question without words. But the most devastating evidence wasn't the affair itself. It was the premeditation behind it. Carmen showed me emails from Natasha to other firm employees, asking questions about Marcus's schedule, his preferences, his caseload. Messages to the office manager requesting to be assigned to Marcus's team specifically. Requests to work late shifts when she knew I was out of town. She studied him, Carmen said, like he was a case she was trying to win. She learned everything about his routine, his habits, his stresses. And then she positioned herself to be the solution to every problem. I thought about my own marriage during those same months. How Marcus had gradually become more distant, more critical. How he'd started making comments about my career, suggesting that my marketing job wasn't as demanding as his legal work, that I didn't understand the pressure he was under. How he'd begun spending more time at the office, claiming he needed to focus on building his partnership without distractions at home. I'd internalized all of it. I'd started working harder to be the perfect wife, cooking his favorite meals, planning surprise date nights, trying to be more interesting when he talked about his cases. I'd blamed myself for our growing distance, thinking I wasn't supportive enough, wasn't understanding enough of his professional demands. Meanwhile, Natasha had been there every day, understanding exactly what he needed because she'd been studying him like a dissertation topic. There's something else, Carmen said, hesitating. Something I probably should have told you months ago, but I wasn't sure how to approach it. She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer, thick with documents. These are copies of expense reports Natasha submitted for reimbursement. Look at the dates and locations. I flipped through the pages. Expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, spa treatments, shopping receipts from high-end boutiques, all charged to the firm account, all justified as client entertainment or business development expenses. Carmen, these receipts are from places I recognize. This restaurant, Marcus took me here for my birthday. This spa, I mentioned wanting to try it, but never had time. This boutique, I pointed out a dress in their window once when we were walking downtown. Keep looking. I turned the page and froze. A receipt from the bridal salon where I'd bought my wedding dress. Dated 2 weeks after my wedding. The purchase? Alterations to a size 6 gown, originally size 8. My wedding dress was a size 8. Natasha was a size 6. She had your dress altered to fit her, Carmen said quietly. And she charged it to the firm as a, quote, costume expense for client presentation. The room started spinning. Not only had Natasha been wearing my dress in my bedroom, she'd actually had it tailored to her body. She'd taken my wedding gown, the dress I'd worn to marry her lover, and had it altered so she could play bride more convincingly. There's more. Carmen flipped to another section of the folder. Insurance documents. She added herself as an emergency contact on Marcus's health insurance, listed herself as quote, partner on his life insurance policy, changed her address in the firm directory to your home address. I stared at the documents, each one showing how systematically Natasha had been replacing me in Marcus's life, not just emotionally or physically, but legally, financially, administratively. She'd been building a paper trail that established her as his partner while I remained legally his wife. How is this even possible? Wouldn't Marcus have had to sign these documents? Carmen nodded grimly. He did sign them. Look at the dates. They were all processed the week you were in Denver for your company's annual conference, 3 months ago. I remembered that trip. A mandatory week-long training session for all marketing directors. I'd complained about the timing because Marcus and I had planned a weekend getaway, but he'd been understanding, supportive, even encouraging about my career development. He'd been understanding because it gave him a full week to legally cement his relationship with my sister. Carmen, I need copies of everything. Every photo, every document, every receipt. Can you help me with that? I already have copies, she said, pulling out a flash drive. I've been updating this file for months, hoping I'd never have to use it. But after seeing you in his office today, looking so lost. She shook her head. You deserve to know the truth. And honestly, they've been getting sloppy lately. More public with their affection, less careful about covering their tracks. I think they're planning something. What kind of something? Carmen looked uncomfortable. I probably shouldn't speculate, but there's been talk around the office. Marcus may be making some big life changes soon. Some of the partners have mentioned he seems distracted, like his focus isn't on the firm anymore. And Natasha... Carmen paused. Natasha's been asking a lot of questions about divorce proceedings. Says she's interested in family law and wants to understand the process for potential clients. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning my exit from Marcus's life. Natasha had been researching how to dismantle my marriage while living in my house, wearing my clothes, sleeping with my husband. I thought about all the times over the past few months when Natasha had initiated conversations about marriage, relationships, compatibility, how she'd casually mentioned that divorce rates were highest in the second year of marriage, that many couples realized they'd married for the wrong reasons, that it was better to end things early before children complicated the situation. I'd thought she was being supportive, giving me a safe space to talk about the normal challenges of newlywed life. Instead, she'd been conducting market research, finding out how attached I was to my marriage, how likely I was to fight for it, and what my weak points were. Carmen, there's something I need to ask you to do, and it might put you in an uncomfortable position. After everything I've just shown you, I think I'm already in an uncomfortable position. What do you need? I need you to call Marcus and tell him there's an emergency at the office, something that requires him to come back from Chicago immediately, tonight. Carmen raised her eyebrows. What kind of emergency? Tell him Natasha was in an accident. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that she's in the hospital and asking for him specifically. Tell him she was upset about something work-related when it happened, and she keeps saying she needs to talk to him about the Henderson case. Delia, what are you planning? I looked at the flash drive in my hand, at the photos on Carmen's phone, at the mountain of evidence that proved my marriage had been a lie for months. I thought about Natasha in my wedding dress, about Marcus signing insurance documents that erased me from his life, about the systematic way they'd been dismantling my world while I smiled and played the supportive wife. "I'm planning to give them exactly what they want," I said. "A chance to be together, publicly, in front of everyone who matters." Carmen stared at me for a long moment, then slowly smiled. "You know what? I've been watching this train wreck for months, wondering when someone was going to do something about it. Make the call. Let's see how much they really love each other when they have to own it in front of the world." Marcus's flight landed at Phoenix Sky Harbor at 11:47 p.m. I know because I was tracking it on my phone from the parking lot of Desert Ridge Hospital, where Carmen had told him Natasha was being treated for her accident. The plan was simple but devastating. Let them find each other in what they thought was a crisis, let their guard down completely, and document their true relationship when they believed no one was watching. I'd spent the afternoon preparing, 3 hidden cameras positioned around the hospital lobby and parking lot. Carmen had briefed the night security guard, an ex-police officer named Dave, who owed her a favor and was disgusted by what he'd learned about the affair. The trap was set. At 12:15 a.m., Marcus's black BMW pulled into the hospital parking lot. Even from a distance, I could see the panic in his movements as he rushed toward the main entrance. He wasn't walking like a concerned boss checking on an employee. He was walking like a man racing to save the woman he loved. 2 minutes later, Natasha's silver Honda appeared from the opposite direction. She'd been waiting somewhere nearby, probably at the 24-hour diner across the street where she could watch for his arrival. The brilliance of her performance became clear as I watched her emerge from her car. She'd actually disheveled her hair, torn her blouse slightly, and even applied makeup to create fake bruises on her arms. They met at the hospital entrance under the bright fluorescent lights, and what happened next was better than any confession I could have recorded. Marcus didn't ask about her injuries first. He didn't check if she was okay. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her desperately, his hands tangling in her hair, her body pressed against his like they hadn't seen each other in months instead of hours. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered, and the hospital's security cameras picked up every word. When Carmen called, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't imagine my life without you. "I'm okay," Natasha replied, her voice breaking with fake emotion. "But Marcus, I can't keep doing this. The lying, the sneaking around, the pretending. I want to be with you properly. I want to be your wife." "Your wife." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them. Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "Soon, I promise. After the divorce is finalized, we can be together openly. You won't have to hide anymore." "Have you talked to her yet? About ending things?" "Not yet. I'm waiting for the right time. Delia's been different lately, more suspicious. I think she might already suspect something." Natasha's laugh was cold and calculating. "My sister sees what she wants to see. She always has. Even when we were kids, I could be standing right in front of her doing something obvious, and she'd miss it completely. She's too trusting, too naive. It's almost sad." From my car, I watched my husband and my sister discuss my upcoming divorce like they were planning a weekend getaway. Casual, excited, already envisioning their future together. The cameras captured everything. Their body language, their intimate touches, the way they fit together like they'd been a couple for years. But the most damaging moment came when Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Natasha something on the screen. "I've been working with a divorce attorney," he said. "Richard Steinberg downtown. He says with the prenup you helped me revise before the wedding, she won't be entitled to much. The house, the cars, most of the assets stay with me." My blood turned to ice. The prenup I'd signed had been Natasha's suggestion. She'd convinced me it was a romantic gesture, a way to prove I was marrying Marcus for love, not money. She'd even recommended the lawyer who reviewed it for me, a lawyer who, I now realized, had probably been working in Marcus's interests all along. "And her marketing business?" Natasha asked. "The client contracts the intellectual property?" "Since she started it after we were married, it's considered marital property. But given that she used my connections and the firm's reputation to build her client base, Steinberg thinks we can argue for at least half ownership. They were planning to take my business, the marketing company I'd built from nothing, working 18-hour days, developing relationships with clients who trusted me personally. They wanted to strip away not just my marriage and my home, but my career, my independence, my future. What about her family? Natasha continued. Her parents? Her friends? They all adore you. How will you handle the social fallout? Marcus shrugged. I'll let them draw their own conclusions. Paint myself as the victim of an incompatible marriage, someone who tried his best but couldn't make it work. Most of our mutual friends are connected to the firm anyway. They'll side with whoever can do more for their careers. And if she fights the divorce? If she tries to expose us? She won't. Marcus's voice was cold, confident. Delia doesn't have the stomach for a real battle. She'll cry, she'll be hurt, but she'll sign the papers. She always takes the path of least resistance. I sat in my car listening to them dissect my personality like I was a legal brief, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. They weren't just betraying me. They were counting on my weakness, my people-pleasing nature, my desire to avoid conflict. They'd built their entire plan around the assumption that I would absorb this pain quietly and disappear from their lives without causing problems. At 12:45 a.m., they finally went inside the hospital to maintain the illusion of Natasha's accident. I gave them 10 minutes, then followed with a different entrance, using the visitor badge Carmen had arranged for me. The night security guard, Dave, met me in the lobby. They're in the family consultation room on the second floor, he said quietly. Private space. I think they're safe from observation. But we've got audio and video running. I took the elevator to the second floor and positioned myself where I could see into the consultation room through a partially open door. Marcus and Natasha sat close together on a small couch, holding hands, talking in low voices about their future. No more pretense, no more performance. Just two people in love, planning their life together at the expense of mine. I've been thinking about the wedding, Natasha was saying. Obviously, we'll want something completely different from your first one. Smaller, more intimate. Maybe a destination? Somewhere exotic where we can start fresh. What about your family? Won't they think it's strange that you're marrying your sister's ex-husband? Natasha's smile was sharp as a blade. My parents will be thrilled. They always liked you better anyway. They'll spin it as true love, conquering all obstacles, fate bringing us together after Delia's tragic inability to be the wife you needed. She paused, then added, Besides, by the time we're ready to get married, enough time will have passed that people will forget the awkwardness. They'll just see a successful lawyer and his devoted wife. His devoted wife? She already saw herself in that role, already owned it in her mind. I love how you think, Marcus said, kissing her forehead. You understand ambition, strategy, and long-term planning. You get that sometimes you have to make difficult choices to build the life you want. Delia never understood that about you. She thought marriage was about romance and feelings, not partnership and mutual advancement. She was holding you back. I watched them comfort each other with my inadequacies, building their love story on the foundation of my failures as a wife. Every criticism felt like a knife, but I forced myself to keep recording, to document every word that would destroy them both. At 1:30 a.m., they finally left the hospital together, Marcus following Natasha's car toward what I assumed was a hotel for the rest of the night. I didn't follow them. I'd seen enough, recorded enough, gathered enough evidence to end both their careers and their relationship in one devastating blow. But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the 24-hour copy center downtown and spent 3 hours organizing everything Carmen and I had collected. Hotel receipts, email screenshots, insurance documents, expense reports, photos, and now video footage of them confessing to adultery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial abuse. I made copies of everything, organized into neat files labeled with dates and locations, one set for my attorney, one set for the partners at Marcus's firm, one set for the State Bar Association, one set for the IRS, since they'd been using firm money for personal expenses, and one set for social media, because I was done protecting their reputations while they destroyed my life. At 4 a.m., I sat in my car outside Marcus's law firm with my laptop, crafting the message that would detonate their world. Not an emotional rant or a cry for sympathy, but a carefully worded statement with attached evidence that would speak for itself. The subject line read, Evidence of Professional Misconduct, Marcus Morrison and Natasha Chen. The message was simple. To the partners of Hartwell Morrison and Associates, please find attached documented evidence of an ongoing affair between partner Marcus Morrison and paralegal Natasha Chen, including misuse of firm resources, fraudulent expense reports, and violation of the firm's ethics policies. Additional evidence has been forwarded to the appropriate regulatory bodies. I trust you will handle this matter with the seriousness it deserves. I attached everything. Every hotel receipt charged to the firm account. Every fake business trip. Every compromising photo Carmen had taken. The video from tonight showing them planning my divorce while conducting their affair on company time. I sent it to all 12 partners at 4:15 a.m., knowing they'd see it first thing when they arrived at the office. But I wasn't done. At 4:30 a.m., I posted a carefully edited version of the story on my personal social media accounts, tagging Marcus, Natasha, their friends, our mutual acquaintances, and their professional contacts. Not the explicit details, but enough information with enough evidence to make the truth undeniable. After months of investigation, I've discovered that my husband Marcus Morrison and my sister Natasha Chen have been conducting a systematic affair while planning to defraud me in our upcoming divorce. Evidence has been turned over to appropriate authorities. I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but so others can make informed decisions about who they choose to trust professionally and personally. The post included the hospital footage of them confessing their plans, the email screenshots showing the affair timeline, and the receipts proving they'd been stealing from his firm to fund their relationship. I tagged local news outlets, legal blogs, and professional networks. Within an hour, the post had been shared dozens of times. By morning, it would be viral. At 5 a.m., I drove home and finally allowed myself to feel the enormity of what I'd done. I'd just ended my marriage, destroyed my sister's career, and probably bankrupted my husband's law firm. I'd weaponized the truth and aimed it at everyone who'd counted on my silence. My phone started buzzing with notifications as people began seeing the posts, sharing them, commenting with shock and support. I turned it off and sat in my empty house, surrounded by the life I'd built with a man who'd been planning to take it all away from me. For the first time in months, the house felt like mine again. At 6 a.m., I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop to check the damage. Marcus's law firm website was already being bombarded with negative reviews. Natasha's LinkedIn profile was getting flooded with comments asking about her, quote, professional ethics. Local news outlets were picking up the story, running headlines like Phoenix lawyer caught in fraud scandal and sister's affair destroys marriage and career. My phone had 127 missed calls and 344 text messages, but I wasn't ready to deal with the aftermath yet. I had one more thing to do. I walked upstairs to my bedroom, opened my closet, and pulled out my wedding dress. The beautiful, expensive gown that Natasha had altered to fit her body, that she'd worn while playing house in my life. I laid it carefully on my bed, took a photo, and posted it with a simple caption, "Free to a good home, previously worn by someone who didn't deserve it." Then I poured another glass of wine and waited for the sun to rise on the first day of my new life. By 8 a.m., my phone had completely crashed from the volume of notifications. The story had spread beyond Phoenix, picked up by legal blogs nationwide, with headlines like, Law firm partner's affair scandal exposes systematic fraud, and paralegal's elaborate scheme to steal sister's husband backfires spectacularly. I'd accidentally become famous, but not in the way any of us had expected. The first official response came at 8:47 a.m. A certified letter delivered by courier from Hartwell, Morrison & Associates, signed by senior partner William Hartwell himself. Ms. Morrison, effective immediately, Mr. Marcus Morrison has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into the allegations contained in your correspondence. Ms. Natasha Chen's employment has been terminated for gross misconduct and violation of firm ethics policies. We will be conducting a complete audit of all expense accounts and client funds. Our deepest apologies for this breach of professional standards. Terminated. Not suspended, not reprimanded. Terminated. Less than 4 hours after I'd sent the evidence, Natasha had been fired from the job she'd specifically targeted to destroy my marriage. At 9:15 a.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase and what looked like legal documents. My first thought was that Marcus had already hired a divorce attorney to control the narrative. But when I opened the door, the man introduced himself as Detective Raymond Kowalski from the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Mrs. Morrison, I'm here about the evidence you submitted regarding potential fraud and embezzlement at your husband's law firm. We've also received similar complaints from the State Bar Association and the IRS. Would you be willing to give an official statement? I invited him in, and for the next 2 hours, I walked Detective Kowalski through everything Carmen and I had discovered. He was particularly interested in the insurance fraud, the way Natasha had listed herself as Marcus's domestic partner while he was legally married to me, potentially collecting benefits she wasn't entitled to. This goes beyond a simple affair, Detective Kowalski explained as he reviewed the evidence. What you've documented here is conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and potentially tax evasion. The hotel receipts alone represent thousands of dollars in fraudulent business expenses. What happens now? We'll be executing search warrants for both Mr. Morrison's office and Ms. Chen's residence today. We'll also be interviewing other employees at the firm to determine if this misconduct extends beyond the two individuals involved. He paused, looking at me with what seemed like respect. I have to say, Mrs. Morrison, I've rarely seen such thorough documentation from a private citizen. You've essentially done half our investigation for us. At 11:30 a.m., while Detective Kowalski was still at my house, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Delia Morrison? The voice was young, female, nervous. Yes, who is this? My name is Rebecca Martinez. I worked at Hartwell Morrison & Associates. I was Marcus's previous paralegal before Natasha got hired. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I saw your social media post this morning and I wanted to tell you something. What happened to you? It almost happened to me too. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? About 2 years ago, Marcus and I started working closely together on a big corporate merger. Long hours, lots of late nights, the same pattern you described with Natasha. He started making advances, subtle at first, then more obvious. Dinner invitations, gifts, comments about how I understood his work stress better than his girlfriend at the time. His girlfriend? Yeah, some marketing executive he was dating said she was too focused on her own career to support his ambitions properly. Sound familiar? The marketing executive was me. Marcus had been planning to replace me with his paralegal 2 years before we'd even gotten engaged. What happened? I asked. I reported him to HR, told them about the inappropriate behavior, the gifts, the after-hours meetings that felt more like dates. But Marcus was already a rising star at the firm, being fast-tracked for a partner. They buried my complaint, transferred me to a different department, and eventually I felt so uncomfortable that I quit. Rebecca, would you be willing to tell this to the police? There's a detective here right now investigating Marcus and Natasha. That's why I'm calling. I want to give a statement. I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't get swept under the rug while everyone focuses on the current scandal. I handed the phone to Detective Kowalski and listened as Rebecca detailed a pattern of predatory behavior that went back years. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me with Natasha. He'd been systematically using his position of power to manipulate women who worked for him, counting on their silence and the firm's protection. At 1 p.m., Carmen called with an update from the office. It's chaos here, she said, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and vindication. FBI agents showed up with search warrants an hour ago. They're boxing up everything from Marcus's office. Computers, files, even his personal items. Natasha tried to come in this morning like nothing had happened, but security escorted her out immediately. How are the other employees reacting? Mixed. Some people are shocked, claiming they never suspected anything. But a lot of others are coming forward with stories now that they feel safe to talk. Apparently, Marcus and Natasha weren't as discreet as they thought. People noticed the favoritism, the expensive lunches charged to client accounts, the way Natasha got assigned to all the high-profile cases despite her lack of experience. What about the partners? Emergency meeting all morning. Word is they're considering dissolving Marcus's partnership entirely, not just suspending him. The firm's reputation is taking a massive hit. 3 clients have already called to terminate their contracts, and that's just the beginning. At 2:30 p.m., my lawyer arrived. Sarah Chen, no relation to Natasha despite the shared surname, was a shark in a Chanel suit who specialized in high-asset divorces and fraud cases. I'd hired her based on online reviews and referrals, but after spending 30 minutes with her, I understood why she had a reputation for destroying unfaithful spouses in court. Delia, what you've handed me isn't just evidence of adultery. It's a roadmap to financial annihilation, she said, spreading the documents across my dining room table. The prenup they manipulated you into signing? Null and void due to fraud and duress. The business assets they planned to claim? We can prove those were built using resources they stole from his firm. What does that mean in practical terms? It means instead of walking away with nothing, you're going to walk away with everything. The house, the cars, his pension, his partnership stake in the firm, assuming there's anything left of it after the criminal investigation. Sarah smiled like a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. And that's before we discuss the civil suits for emotional distress, fraud, and conspiracy. At 4 p.m., the local news vans started arriving outside my house. I watched from my living room window as reporters set up cameras on my front lawn, preparing for what looked like extended coverage. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, immediately started ringing with calls from news producers, podcast hosts, and true crime bloggers wanting exclusive interviews. But the call that mattered came at 4:47 p.m. from Detective Kowalski. Mrs. Morrison, we've executed the search warrants. I wanted to give you an update on what we found. What did you find? Evidence that this conspiracy goes deeper than we initially thought. We found documents in Ms. Chen's apartment showing she'd been researching your background, your business connections, even your family's financial situation for over a year before she applied to work at the firm. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was premeditated identity theft. My mouth went dry. Identity theft? She had copies of your credit reports, tax returns, business contracts, information she had no legal right to access. We also found detailed plans for taking over your marketing business, including forged documents bearing your signature authorizing the transfer of client contracts. The scope of their betrayal kept expanding. It wasn't just an affair or even a planned divorce. It was a systematic theft of my entire life. There's more, Detective Kowalski continued. We found video files on her computer. Recordings she made of herself in your house, wearing your clothes, practicing being you. Hours and hours of footage of her rehearsing conversations, mimicking your mannerisms, even practicing your signature. I sank into my couch, overwhelmed by the calculated nature of Natasha's obsession. She hadn't just wanted my husband, she'd wanted to become me entirely. At 6 p.m., the evening news led with my story. I watched from my living room as the anchor delivered a summary that made my life sound like a soap opera. A Phoenix woman's social media post exposing her husband's affair has uncovered what police are calling one of the most elaborate schemes of financial and identity fraud in recent memory. The case involves a prominent law firm, forged documents, and a conspiracy that may have been years in the making. They showed footage of FBI agents carrying boxes out of Marcus's office building, interviews with former colleagues expressing shock and disgust, and legal experts speculating about the potential criminal charges. My face appeared briefly, a professional headshot from my marketing company's website, but the focus was on the institutional failure that had allowed this to happen. At 7:15 p.m., my parents finally called. I'd been dreading this conversation since the morning, knowing they'd be confused, hurt, and probably angry about the public nature of my response. Delia, honey, we just saw the news, my mother said, her voice strained. Why didn't you call us? Why didn't you come to us before making this so public? Because I needed evidence, Mom. I needed people to believe me, and the only way to ensure that was to make the truth undeniable. But Natasha is still your sister, my father interjected. Family problems should be handled within the family. Dad, Natasha stopped being my sister the moment she decided to systematically destroy my life for her own benefit. What she did wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated campaign to steal my identity. There was a long silence before my mother spoke again. We had no idea it was this serious. Natasha told us you and Marcus were having problems, that the marriage might not work out, but she made it sound like normal newlywed struggles. She was preparing you for the divorce she was planning to cause. She wanted you to see the end of my marriage as inevitable, maybe even my fault. Oh, sweetheart, my mother's voice broke. I'm so sorry. We should have seen through her manipulation. We should have protected you better. At 8:30 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number that made my blood run cold. You've destroyed everything. I hope you're happy. This isn't over. The number was blocked, but I knew it was from Natasha. I immediately forwarded the message to Detective Kowalski and added it to the growing file of evidence against her. At 9 p.m., as I was finally preparing to eat something for the first time all day, my doorbell rang again. Through the peephole, I could see a young woman with a camera crew behind her. I recognized her as Kelly Morrison, no relation, from Channel 12 News. I opened the door just wide enough to speak through the chain. Mrs. Morrison, I'm Kelly Morrison from Channel 12. I know you've been through an incredibly difficult day, but would you be willing to give us a brief statement? The public is really responding to your story, and many people are calling you brave for exposing this level of corruption. I looked past her at the news van, at the neighbors who had gathered on their porches to watch the spectacle, at the reporters who'd been camped outside my house all afternoon. I'll give you a statement, I said, unlatching the chain and stepping onto my front porch. The cameras rolled as I stood in front of the home I'd shared with Marcus, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking nothing like the polished wife I'd tried so hard to be for the past year. This morning I was a woman whose husband and sister had been systematically stealing my life while counting on my silence to protect them. Tonight I'm a woman who refused to be quiet while they destroyed everything I'd worked for. I didn't share this story for revenge or sympathy. I shared it because the truth deserves to see daylight, and because other women need to know that they don't have to absorb betrayal quietly. I paused, looking directly into the camera. To anyone who's ever been told they're being paranoid, or oversensitive, or crazy for questioning what they see with their own eyes, trust your instincts, document everything, and never let someone convince you that protecting their reputation is more important than protecting your own life. The interview aired at 10 p.m. and by 11 p.m., it had been shared thousands of times across social media platforms. I'd become the face of women who refuse to stay silent about betrayal, who fight back against systematic manipulation, who choose truth over peace. As I finally turned off my phone and prepared for bed in my empty house, I realized that while Marcus and Natasha had succeeded in destroying my marriage, they'd accidentally created something much more powerful, a woman who would never again mistake silence for strength, or peace for justice. The system had responded exactly as it should have. Now it was time for the real consequences to begin. 3 weeks after the story broke, I was sitting in Dr. Miranda Hayes' office, staring at a box of tissues I hadn't touched yet. The trauma therapist came highly recommended by the victim advocacy group that had reached out to me after my news interview went viral. I'd resisted therapy initially, thinking I was handling everything fine, but the nightmares and panic attacks had convinced me otherwise. You keep saying you feel guilty about destroying their lives, Dr. Hayes observed, her voice gentle but probing. But let's examine that word, destroyed. What exactly did you destroy? I shifted in the leather chair, uncomfortable with the question. Their careers, their relationships, their reputations. Marcus might lose his law license. Natasha can't find work anywhere in the legal field. Their names are permanently associated with this scandal. And what were they planning to destroy? The question hung in the air like smoke. I'd been so focused on the aftermath of my actions that I'd almost forgotten what had precipitated them. My marriage, my business, my financial security, my sense of reality, I trailed off, seeing her point. Delia, you didn't destroy their lives. You interrupted their crime and progress. You stopped them from completing the theft of your entire existence. Dr. Hayes leaned forward. The guilt you're feeling? That's a trauma response. You've been conditioned to believe that protecting yourself makes you the aggressor. Over the next hour, we dissected 8 months of gaslighting, manipulation, and systematic psychological abuse. Dr. Hayes helped me understand that my hypervigilance wasn't paranoia. It was survival instinct. My need to document everything wasn't obsessive behavior. It was protective intelligence. The woman who found her sister in that wedding dress and started recording, Dr. Hayes said as our session ended, She knew something was wrong long before her conscious mind was ready to accept it. You survived because you trusted that inner voice. After therapy, I drove to my new apartment in Scottsdale. The house I'd shared with Marcus was still tied up in legal proceedings, but I'd needed space away from those memories to heal. The apartment was smaller, simpler, but it felt clean in a way that my old home never could again. Carmen had helped me move, bringing wine and Chinese takeout on my first night. She'd quit Hartwell Morrison and Associates the day after the FBI raids, disgusted by how the partners had enabled Marcus's behavior for years. I got a job offer from the district attorney's office, she told me, over lo mein noodles. Apparently, having, quote, the moral courage to document workplace corruption is a selling point on resumes now. Are you going to take it? Already did. I start Monday. She raised her wine glass. Here's to career moves that let you sleep at night. The healing process wasn't linear. Some days I felt strong, vindicated, proud of how I'd handled everything. Other days I woke up crying, mourning not just my marriage but my faith in my own judgment. How had I been so blind? How had I missed the signs for so long? Dr. Hayes helped me understand that question differently. You weren't blind, Delia. You were systematically blinded. Gaslighting works by making victims doubt their own perceptions. The fact that you eventually saw through it speaks to your strength, not your weakness. A month after the initial exposé, I received an unexpected visitor. Rebecca Martinez, the former paralegal who testified about Marcus's previous misconduct, stood at my apartment door with a bottle of champagne and a nervous smile. I wanted to thank you, she said when I invited her in. Because of your courage to speak up, 3 other women have come forward with similar stories about Marcus. The State Bar Association is building a pattern of behavior case that will ensure he never practices law again. 3 others? Law students, junior associates, even a client whose divorce he handled, all the same pattern, vulnerable women he could manipulate and control. Rebecca shook her head. You didn't just save yourself, Delia. You saved every woman he would have targeted in the future. That conversation marked a turning point in my healing. I began to see my actions not as revenge, but as protection, for myself and for others. I started sleeping better, eating regularly, rebuilding the parts of my life that had been steadily eroded during my marriage. My marketing business, surprisingly, had thrived since the scandal broke. Companies reached out wanting to work with the woman who fought back, and I found myself specializing in crisis communication and reputation management, skills I'd learned the hard way. But the real breakthrough came 6 weeks after everything started, when I received a call from someone unexpected. Ms. Morrison? This is Jennifer Walsh from the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We've been following your story, and we wondered if you'd be interested in speaking at our annual conference. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm ready for public speaking about this yet. I understand your hesitation, but here's what we're seeing. Since your story went public, our hotline calls have increased by 40%. Women are recognizing patterns of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and systematic gaslighting in their own relationships. Your story gave them permission to trust their instincts. That statistic hit me like a physical force. 40% more women asked for help because they'd seen my story and recognized their own experiences. What would you want me to talk about? The early warning signs you missed, the documentation process that saved you, the importance of having an exit strategy. Practical advice from someone who's been through it and comes out stronger. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of 300 domestic violence counselors, survivors, and advocates at the Phoenix Convention Center. My hands shook as I approached the microphone, but my voice was steady. 18 months ago, I thought I was living a fairy tale. I'd married a successful lawyer, moved into a beautiful house, and started building what I thought was a perfect life. I had no idea I was actually living in a carefully constructed prison, one that my own sister was helping to build. I told them about the subtle erosion of my confidence, the way Marcus had gradually isolated me from friends who might have seen through his facade. I explained how Natasha had positioned herself as my ally, while systematically gathering information to use against me. The hardest part wasn't discovering the affair, I said. It was accepting that I'd been right to feel suspicious, right to document strange behavior, right to trust my instincts when everyone around me was telling me I was being paranoid. After my speech, dozens of women approached me with their own stories. Some were still trapped in manipulative relationships, others were in various stages of escape, and many were years into recovery but still processing the trauma. One woman, probably in her 60s, grabbed my hands with tears in her eyes. "I've been out of my abusive marriage for 10 years, but I still second-guess every instinct I have. Hearing you talk about trusting your inner voice, it's the permission I needed to start trusting myself again." That conference changed my trajectory completely. I began speaking regularly at universities, law enforcement conferences, and corporate events about recognizing and responding to manipulation tactics. My marketing business evolved to focus on helping other women rebuild their professional reputations after leaving abusive situations. The legal proceedings against Marcus and Natasha moved forward steadily. Marcus pled guilty to fraud and embezzlement charges, receiving 2 years in prison and permanent disbarment. The civil suits were still pending, but my attorney was confident we'd recover significant damages. Natasha faced federal charges for identity theft and conspiracy. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was manipulated by Marcus, that she was another victim rather than a co-conspirator. But the evidence was too extensive. The year of research she'd done on my life, the forged documents, the systematic nature of her infiltration. "She's trying to use the same manipulation tactics on the jury that she used on you," Sarah, my attorney, explained after one particularly dramatic court session where Natasha had broken down crying on the witness stand. "But this time, we have documentation of her real behavior." The trial was difficult but cathartic. Watching Natasha try to maintain her victim persona, while mountains of evidence contradicted her, every word felt like watching a master manipulator finally run out of tools. The hardest moment came when I had to testify about finding her in my wedding dress that final time. Sitting in the witness box, describing how she'd taunted me about my marriage while wearing the symbol of my commitment, I felt all the rage and pain I'd been processing in therapy. But I also felt something else: clarity. She'd shown me exactly who she was that night, and I'd been strong enough to see it, document it, and act on it. During cross-examination, Natasha's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, someone who'd destroyed a family relationship over marital difficulties. "Ms. Morrison, isn't it true that you could have handled this situation privately, that you chose to make it public out of spite?" I looked directly at Natasha as I answered. "I made it public because private confrontation had failed for months, because I needed witnesses to the truth, and because other women needed to see that you don't have to suffer manipulation in silence." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. As the verdict was read, I watched Natasha's face crumble, finally showing genuine emotion instead of calculated performance. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, but I felt profound relief that the truth had been heard and validated. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked me how I felt about the conviction. "I feel like justice has been served, not just for me, but for every woman who's been told she's crazy for questioning what she sees with her own eyes. I feel like the legal system works the way it's supposed to work when victims are believed and evidence is taken seriously." That evening, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and my laptop writing thank you notes to everyone who'd supported me through the process. Carmen, who'd risked her job to help me gather evidence. Dr. Hayes, who'd helped me understand my own strength. Rebecca and the other women who'd found the courage to speak up about Marcus's pattern of abuse. But the most important letter was to myself, a recognition of the woman I'd become through this ordeal, someone who trusted her instincts, who demanded truth over peace, who chose self-protection over people-pleasing. I wasn't the same person who'd walked into that bedroom 8 months ago and found her sister in her wedding dress. That woman had been trained to absorb betrayal quietly, to prioritize others' comfort over her own reality. The woman I'd become was someone who documented everything, who built support networks, who spoke up not just for herself but for others. Someone who understood that healing wasn't about forgetting the trauma, but about transforming it into wisdom and strength. The scars were still there, probably always would be, but they weren't weaknesses anymore. They were proof of survival, evidence of resilience, markers of a battle fought and won. As I got ready for bed in my safe, quiet apartment, I realized I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was building a completely new one, stronger and more authentic than anything I'd lost. And for the first time in over a year, I fell asleep without checking the locks twice or wondering who might be betraying me while I slept. I was finally truly free. 2 years after I found Natasha in my wedding dress for the last time, I was standing in a completely different bedroom, in a house I'd bought with my own money, watching my best friend Sarah get ready for her wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now the person friends called when they needed someone who understood the weight of marriage vows, someone who could help them distinguish between love and manipulation. "Delia, can you help me with this zipper?" Sarah asked, turning her back to me. Her dress was nothing like mine had been. Simpler, more modern, chosen without the pressure of impressing anyone or fitting into someone else's vision of perfection. As I pulled the zipper up, I thought about how different this moment felt from my own wedding preparation. No anxiety about whether everything was perfect enough, no sister lurking in the background with hidden agendas, no sense that I was performing a role rather than celebrating a choice. "You look beautiful," I told Sarah, and meant it in a way I'd never been able to mean it about myself in my wedding dress. The past 2 years had been a masterclass in rebuilding from the ground up. After the trials ended and the media attention died down, I'd faced the harder work of reconstructing not just my life, but my understanding of myself. The woman who'd married Marcus had been seeking validation, approval, a sense of belonging in a world that seemed more sophisticated than the one she'd come from. The woman I'd become had learned that the only approval that mattered was her own. My marketing business had evolved into something I'd never expected, a consultancy specializing in crisis communication for women leaving abusive relationships. I helped them rebuild their professional reputations, craft their own narratives, and develop strategies for moving forward without being defined by what they'd survived. The waiting list for my services was 6 months long. Lawyers referred clients to me. Domestic violence organizations sent women who needed to reconstruct their public image after escaping. I'd accidentally found my calling in the ashes of my own disaster. But the most unexpected development had been the book deal. Invisible Chains: How I Escaped Systematic Manipulation and Reclaimed My Life had been published 8 months ago and spent 12 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. I'd written it during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come, when the only way to process the magnitude of what had happened was to examine it line by line, pattern by pattern. The book wasn't just my story, it was a manual for recognizing psychological manipulation, documenting abuse, and building the courage to act. I'd included all the warning signs I'd missed, all the red flags I'd rationalized away, all the moments when my instincts had tried to save me, but I'd been too conditioned to listen. Readers wrote to me daily. Women who'd recognized their own marriages in my chapters about emotional isolation. Daughters who'd finally understood why their mothers had seemed so different after remarrying. Sisters who'd realized they were being manipulated by siblings they'd trusted. The letter that had affected me most came from a paralegal in Dallas. "Dear Delia, I read your book and realized I was following the exact same pattern as Natasha with my boss. I'd convinced myself I was in love, that we had a special connection, that his wife just didn't understand him. Your chapter about professional manipulation made me see how he was using his power over me to get what he wanted, while keeping me in a position where I had everything to lose. I quit my job yesterday and reported him to the state bar. Thank you for showing me that being the other woman doesn't make you powerful. It makes you a tool in someone else's game." The book tour had been therapeutic in ways I hadn't expected. Standing in bookstores and auditoriums, telling my story to strangers who nodded in recognition, I understood that my experience hadn't been uniquely devastating. It had been universally resonant. The tactics Marcus and Natasha had used were from a playbook that manipulators everywhere shared. But the real transformation had been internal. I'd learned to trust my instincts, without needing external validation. I'd built a life that belonged entirely to me, with friends who'd been chosen for their integrity rather than their social connections, work that fulfilled me rather than impressing others, and a home that felt like sanctuary rather than a stage set. The house I'd bought in North Scottsdale was everything my marital home hadn't been: warm, personal, filled with things I'd chosen because I loved them rather than because they looked right. My office walls were covered with thank you letters from women I'd helped, photos from speaking engagements, and my law school diploma, because yes, I'd decided to go to law school. At 31, I was a first-year law student at Arizona State, focusing on family law and victim advocacy. The idea had crystallized during Natasha's trial, watching how the legal system could be weaponized by abusers, but also how it could protect victims when properly utilized. I want to be the lawyer I needed when this was happening to me, I'd told my admissions interviewer. Someone who understands manipulation tactics from the inside out, who can recognize financial abuse patterns, who knows how to build cases that predators can't charm their way out of. My professors were impressed by my real-world experience. My fellow students treated me like a wise older sister, despite being only a few years their senior. I'd learned more about human nature in 2 years of survival than some people learned in a lifetime of theory. The legal settlement from Marcus and Natasha had been substantial, enough to pay for law school, buy my house outright, and establish the financial independence that had been systematically threatened during my marriage. Marcus had lost everything: his license, his partnership, his reputation, and ultimately, his freedom when he'd violated his parole by attempting to contact me through social media. Natasha had served 18 months in federal prison and been deported back to her birth country of Canada, where she'd apparently struggled to find work in any professional capacity. Her parents had reached out to me once, asking if I'd consider healing the family by dropping the civil suit against her. I'd responded through my attorney, "The family was broken the moment your daughter decided to systematically destroy my life for her own benefit. Healing happens when people take responsibility for their actions, not when victims are pressured to forgive unrepentant abusers." At Sarah's wedding reception, I found myself in the familiar role of maid of honor, but this time the role felt authentic rather than performative. I'd helped Sarah navigate the early stages of her relationship with David, teaching her the questions to ask, the patterns to watch for, the red flags that indicated manipulation rather than love. "How do you know he's not just telling me what I want to hear?" she'd asked me months ago when things started getting serious. "Because he disagrees with you about things that matter," I'd answered. "He has his own opinions, his own friends, his own life that doesn't revolve around managing your perceptions of him. Manipulators adapt themselves to be irresistible. Authentic people remain themselves and let you decide if you're compatible." David had passed every test, not because he was perfect, but because he was genuine. He didn't love-bomb Sarah with excessive gifts and attention. He didn't isolate her from friends or subtly criticize her independence. He didn't try to rush the relationship or pressure her into commitments before she was ready. Most importantly, he encouraged her success rather than feeling threatened by it. When Sarah got promoted to senior account manager at her advertising firm, David threw her a celebration party. When she decided to pursue her MBA, he helped her study. When she needed space to work on a demanding project, he gave it without making her feel guilty. These things seemed basic, but I'd learned they were actually revolutionary in a world where so many relationships were built on power dynamics rather than partnership. During my maid of honor speech, I looked out at the crowd of happy faces and felt a peace I'd never experienced at my own wedding. "Sarah and David," I said, raising my champagne glass, "you've shown everyone here what love looks like when it's built on truth rather than illusion, on respect rather than possession, on partnership rather than performance. You've chosen each other with clear eyes and open hearts, and that's the foundation of something that will last." The applause was warm and genuine, and I realized that for the first time in years, I was at a celebration where everyone was genuinely happy, where no one was hiding secret agendas or nursing private resentments. After the reception, I drove home through the desert landscape that had become my chosen territory. The city lights twinkled below as I wound through the mountain roads to my house, and I felt the deep satisfaction of a life reconstructed on my own terms. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back patio, looking up at stars that were visible here in a way they'd never been in the city. My phone buzzed with a text from my literary agent. "Netflix wants to option the book for a limited series. Interested?" I smiled, thinking about how my story might help even more women recognize the patterns of manipulation in their own lives. But then I set the phone aside. The decision could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I just wanted to sit in the peace I'd built for myself. The woman who'd married Marcus had been afraid of being alone, afraid of not being chosen, afraid of not being enough. The woman I'd become had learned that being alone was different from being lonely, that being chosen meant nothing if the chooser was duplicitous, and that being enough had nothing to do with other people's approval. I thought about the wedding dress that had started it all, now donated to a program that provided formal wear to women escaping domestic violence, women who needed to look professional for job interviews or court appearances, but had left everything behind for their safety. My dress was helping other women rebuild their lives, which felt like the perfect transformation for something that had represented so much pain. The nightmares had stopped months ago. The hypervigilance had faded. The constant need to document everything for self-protection had evolved into a healthy awareness of my environment, without the desperate edge of survival mode. I'd even started dating again, carefully, slowly, with all the wisdom I'd earned through suffering. There was a law professor at ASU, a gentleman who'd survived his own manipulative marriage and understood why I needed transparency, consistency, and patience. We were taking it slow, building trust through demonstrated actions rather than romantic gestures. "I don't need you to save me," I'd told him on our third date. "I already saved myself. But I'm open to building something together if you're interested in a partner who won't accept less than honesty." He'd smiled and said, "I wouldn't know what to do with someone who needed saving. I'm looking for someone strong enough to call me on my bullshit and secure enough to let me call them on theirs." That conversation had happened 6 months ago, and we were still discovering the rare comfort of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than mutual need. As I sat in my garden under the Arizona stars, I realized that finding Natasha in my wedding dress that last time had been the beginning of my real life, not the end of my old one. Everything before that moment had been preparation, learning what I would and wouldn't accept, developing the skills I'd need to protect myself, building the strength to choose truth over comfort. The woman who'd walked into that bedroom 2 years ago had been living a borrowed life in a borrowed dress, playing a role she'd thought would bring her happiness. The woman sitting in this garden had learned that happiness wasn't something you achieved by meeting other people's expectations. It was something you created by honoring your own truth. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Is this Delia Morrison?" The voice was young, nervous, familiar in its desperation. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Amanda Chen. No relation to Natasha, I promise. I got your number from the domestic violence hotline. I think I'm living your story. I found my roommate wearing my engagement dress yesterday, and when I confronted her, she said things that made me realize, I think she's been trying to steal my fiancé." I sat up straighter, feeling the familiar surge of protective anger that came whenever I encountered another woman trapped in the web of systematic manipulation. "Amanda, are you somewhere safe right now?" "Yes, I'm at my parents' house. But I don't know what to do. I don't have proof like you did. I don't know how to." "First, you document everything from this moment forward," I said, walking into my office and pulling out a notebook. "Second, you trust your instincts. They're trying to save you. And third, you remember that you're not crazy, you're not paranoid, and you're not alone." For the next hour, I walked Amanda through the same process Carmen had helped me navigate: how to gather evidence, how to protect herself legally and financially, how to build a support network of people who would believe her story. When we hung up, I felt the deep satisfaction that had become the driving force of my new life. This was why I'd survived my own manipulation, not just to rebuild my own life, but to help other women recognize and escape theirs. I walked back out to my patio, raised my wine glass to the desert sky, and whispered a promise to every woman still trapped in borrowed lives, still questioning their own perceptions, still afraid to trust their instincts. Your truth matters. Your instincts are valid. Your life belongs to you. And when you're ready to fight for it, you won't be fighting alone. The stars seemed to twinkle in response, and for the first time since this all began, I felt not just healed but whole. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just free from manipulation, but powerful in my truth. The woman who'd found her sister in her wedding dress had been transformed into someone who helped other women find themselves. And that transformation was worth every moment of pain it had taken to achieve. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.